So here we are starting session 7, following on from the previous session in which you, Julie, spoke about your time with Adidar when you gifted him with the album containing the sacred ash packets. And he commented, we actually had a sacred culture in the past, didn't we? So you'll speak to that comment from Beloved and also speak more broadly about how he worked with individuals in the art process and also more broadly.
Yes. So, as I described being in his room, both in terms of his bright being, the room, and seat of the source of bright being, in the shoots, where his sphere of bright feeling of love, bliss, and his blessing and his outshining, and the means by which the apparent objects and forms are and images are arising in that space. He's demonstrating and showing to me his intervention, his divine outshining in the bright being of his transmission. And then as I would move from that space bodily into the place of sequencing, it was very similar to the succession that he describes between the root of mind, the seat of the seemingly separate self sitting in the chair, and the chair itself as an image also of the source position. And then feeling the even not necessarily noticed transition from a world full of color, where I'm in a space with Beloved and with devotees, and he is then sequencing the images, and it's colorful. All sorts of events and happenings and peoples and intersections and noticings. It becomes extremely full and expansive of happenings and exchanges, and Beloved putting on his white gloves and all of us putting on our white gloves to be able to handle any of the images or the objects that he's working with. And as I indicated, maybe even putting slippers on his feet because his feet might be cold. He's in an all black outfit as he's working, something that is tight to his body so that it will not be a fabric that is flowing or cumbersome to his movements. We have a number of devotees coming in and out of the space to serve him. And the complexity then of what is occurring around him is noticed. And then I also noticed that, as I indicated, surprised by the imagery that he had created. And it was such a broad spectrum from incredibly extraordinary, beautiful images of the iconography of that which is visible within the spectrum of light, manifest light. And then also there were really dark images of death and skeletons and disturbing images also. And in noticing this, and also in reflecting and entering into telling this Leela, I'm noticing the nature of, again, the nature of the true Leela of his manifestation, that what he initiated is the constant process that we are participating in, that is coincident with the time and space and place and noticings of all of the various forms and images and thoughts and meanings. But the only constant in the room itself is the conscious feeling of being, the bright energy dimension also that is synchronous with his being, that is the love bliss. And in his communication about the She Is Mind suite, he says that he's addressing the fact that the visual contemplation of mind is noticing that the mind is the maker of the images, so that there's also a play between a real person, like I'm actually sitting there and I appear as an object, and also there are images and objects in the room, and specifically also more exaggeratedly so when you go from the room where he's shooting, just there's a chair or just a person or standing or sitting, and then going into the more elaborate form of the colorful realm of multiplicity. So he's indicating that the she is this energy dimension of reality, the colorful manifestation of forms. But he said that She Is Mind is not merely about either the male and the female in the conventional or exoteric terms. It's also about the he and the she in the ultimate or esoteric terms. So I wanted to speak about this in terms of how it relates to the work that he did with those who were close to him, when he indicated that we did have a sacred culture at one time. And when I refer back to this period of time, I'm not just referring to a moment in time that was isolated in relationship to how he worked with individuals over all the years of his intervention and physical incarnation, because there were many periods of time when different groups of individuals and devotees that were maybe on his body or serving in some way more peripherally, or advocates or patrons, or all the different beings that have actually recognized him, which means an intuitive recognition of him, may not even be comprehensive in terms of being able to distinguish the uniqueness of his incarnation in relationship to how the divine great tradition had manifested previously in time and space through great realizers or siddha gurus or true mystic saints or sages or yogis or true teachers and true devotees. But all of these beings are participating in this process with him. But there are also specific individuals whom were available to him at any given time to be able to be there with him in his own physical, actual room, bodily on him, helping him accomplish specifically what he was doing in relationship to what he describes as his gifts, his treasures, and his agencies. So the image art here that he is doing, he has said that the human subjects of my image art were people with whom I was associated. I didn't hire models and so on. They were people within my sphere, available for me, available, emphasis on available, for me to relate to in artistic terms. Now, again, it wasn't just artistic terms. It was also available for him to relate to in any time relative to what it was that he was revealing or instructing about, or manifesting his own divine self demonstration of the seventh stage way. So during this period of time that I refer to in the so-called past of sacred culture, one of the things that I knew that he was referring to at that moment in time, when I described sitting on the bed and showing him the prasad that was given to all devotees during more ceremonial or sacred events over the years, he was referring to the fact that he was actually living with those, a large group of people 24/7 who were one pointed and free in their energy and attention to be there with him in his house, not meaning just peripherally, but actually in his house daily. A large group of men and women. It was during that period of time that he taught us what sacred culture is and how the right relationship would be lived with him on his body. And oftentimes this repeated itself, where there were different periods of time where he would say there would be a celebration amongst those who were around him that this is the right form of the intimacy. And it would mean that all of us, even in our limitations and relative maturity, were able to mysteriously coincide with him, for him to work with very directly. And as he indicated, he said that I did not hire professional models in speaking about his image artwork. That is the same as establishing a sacred culture and indicating what sacred occasion is, how to engage in it either ritually or ceremonially. All of that is secondary to being directly in his person, which is the primary sacred event, and serving his divine purpose. So he said that they're real human beings whose real condition of existence is also revealed, and who also are representations of real human conditions, otherwise true of human beings altogether. So it is true of those individuals that I worked with, and it is true of human beings altogether, you see. So it's something of the human condition in all of its aspects that is being shown here. It is simply revelatory and telling the truth, showing things the way that they are, not just the way that they are in some vulgar, low sense, when he means that, yes, he's showing the whole spectrum of possibilities in the manifest domain of light and energy. But so he's revealing it in, as he says, in every sense. So that there needs to be an understanding of these images in that regard then. So there are many, many levels, he indicates, and dimensions to his work, his artistic work, and to its meaning in terms of what any image contains. But again, he says you can't just create a huge amount of words about every picture because there's too many. And to point out that in creating this particular suite, there's over 2,000 images, I think 2,223, something like that. So he says that it's not about the examination of each particular image and having a whole lot of words to say about it. It's the comprehensive understanding by participating in his space. So to bring all of what I just said together, I'll go back to the room, his room, the bright room, his sphere of indivisibility, the unqualified light that is being brought down into the space of mind that is created by the fist of ego act, that then darkens and fractures or creates a schism. The vibratory effect of the light then becomes pantonal, and there is the reverberations of all sorts of manifest forms within the light spectrum. And at every level of the way in which we sensorially are aware, at a feeling, tacit and tangible feeling level of being manifest here and interrelating. Inherently so, we are all interdependent. There is no separation in that regard. So I walk out into the room where he's doing all of this sequencing and noticing the span of the differences in the images. And immediately I'm struck with the reality communication that he has always revealed, which is that our embodiment here is, yes, it can be full of joy and beauty and love and celebration and pleasure, but there is also the reality that every single aspect of this interconnectedness that can be a demonstration and a participation in love will also die. And there are also aspects of it that are dark. And then I had described how what I noticed in that revelation of watching his work in this specific suite with me, there was also the noticing of how this was duplicated in the beings with whom he was working with. And this also occurred most intimately to him in relationship to those who were in his house. And one of the things that began to happen at a certain point in time, and I think I began to speak about this before when I said that I noticed his displeasure, and this is a common theme where he would exhibit his displeasure because of the manner in which we were superimposing the ego act, where we were focusing in the imagery of mind that was created by the ego act, associating with one another and with him and superimposing those assumptions and views upon him, and also then bodily dissociating from him, abstracting him, and being insensitive to him and one another in terms of how this act was affecting the work that he needed to do and accomplish. So he had to reflect that to us in very strong ways at times because it was urgent for him to be able to accomplish what he needed to do, given the brevity of his manifest form and the fragility of it. And he did not know how long he would be able to have in order to make this intervention complete and to be able to establish and to account for all the means of agency required for his work to be continued in his eternal time, but also in perpetuity, in manifest form, bodily, emphasis on that, coming all the way down, as he describes in terms of the uniqueness of his transmission. As I said, in the samadhi of the thumbs and the different forms of initiatory processes that occur at the human level, becoming truly human, listening, hearing, and seeing in the perfect practice and all the esoteric yoga associated with that, and the understanding of the structures of the psychobiography of the ego that manifests as the first 6 stages of life that he describes. I understand that in listening to this, there might be things that will require study on the part of individuals to really be able to feel the fullness of and the nuances and the vast aspects of this recognition, the simplicity of this recognition. So again, to refer to this specific moment in time with those with whom I was serving with, and re-entering into the sphere of his most intimate domain with the Gurukula and with a number of devotees who were very intimate to him, I think I indicated already that I noticed that, there's been another shift. The group of individuals is a bit different, and the way that the Gurukula is relating to him is different. And then I began to notice that his disturbance was getting even more intense. And a confession on my own part is that I did not do very well at all when he was disturbed. Nobody liked it, but everyone did have a different relationship to how they dealt with it or coped with it or transcended themselves in the midst of it, was able to stay in relationship with him about it, whether they stayed in the room or not, whether they ended up staying in his intimate domain or not. Those factors were not knowable from the conventional point of view of evaluation in terms of what they meant. But the relationship itself was always consistently available to be in the context of his bright being, rather than identifying with and dramatizing the aspects of multiplicity in relationship to one another as the mind and as the body that is the ego act that creates this world that appears to be struggling and suffering so much in the warring with one another, as if this manifest form as it appears in its multiplicity is what is real and reality itself. It is real in the sense that we are manifest here, and there are patterns of association and psychobiographies of the ego that we're working with. So in the process of Beloved's work with me, he began to notice this disturbance in me. And I didn't do very well, as I said, with his disturbance. And I would begin to recoil in relationship to this feeling disturbance. And as I did this, I became more and more angular myself, a schism of wrong relationship to him and to those that were around him, and then all of the pettiness that begins to manifest through the political, Oedipal, emotional, sexual, social ego dynamics. And this happened around Adida, honestly, until the day he left his body. So he was, no matter what he demonstrated in terms of his changes that manifested in the way he could or could not work, all of us around him continued to dramatize certain aspects of the egoic persona, whether it be in the first 3 stages of life, the 4th, 5th, or the 6th. These were all being superimposed upon him after the divine self-emergence and even after the Lopez event. And all I can say is that it is extremely painful, and I know many, many, many devotees have experienced and felt this pain, bodily and at heart. And the symptoms that not only he had to endure physically, but that we all had to endure psychophysically was a very difficult tapas. And I do want to say that he had to reflect to us that we were dramatizing. We weren't actually participating in true tapas and purification. Because if it was true tapas and purification, we would be transcending ourselves so that his circumstance would always remain right for him, so that we could stay with him and be there with him in the bright space of reality being itself. This is Adida as he is. This is the Siddha Guru transmission that is recognized. So I'm going to read you some communications of what he gave me when I began to notice this. And I will begin by doing this in this next podcast.